The thunderclap exploded across the Montana sky as Katherine Lawson urged her exhausted mare through the relentless downpour. Her soaked dress clung to her slender frame, and her usually tamed auburn hair had become a wild tangle plastered against her face. She had been traveling for 3 days, fleeing the life she'd left behind in Boston, a life of polished drawing rooms and unwanted suitors that had become unbearable after her father's passing. The year was 1875, and the Montana Territory represented everything her Boston life didn't: freedom, possibility, and the chance to reinvent herself. At 22, Katherine had inherited enough from her father to purchase a small plot of land near the growing settlement of Hollow Creek, sight unseen. Her city friends had called her mad, but Katherine knew staying would have meant surrendering to the marriage her stepmother had arranged to the widower Mr. Holloway, a man 30 years her senior. Lightning split the sky again, illuminating a small ranch house in the distance. Her mare whinnied nervously as thunder followed, nearly bucking Katherine from the saddle. "Easy, girl," Katherine soothed, though her own heart raced with apprehension. The ranch wasn't on her crude map, but with night falling and the storm intensifying, she had little choice but to seek shelter. As she approached, she noticed the fence line of a modest corral where several horses huddled beneath a lean-to. Just beyond, she spotted a dark shape on the ground, a body, motionless in the mud. Dismounting quickly, Katherine approached with caution. A man lay face down, one leg bent at an unnatural angle, blood seeping through his shirt. A Winchester rifle lay just beyond his outstretched fingers. "Sir," Katherine called, kneeling beside him, the mud soaking through her already drenched skirts. "Can you hear me?" The man groaned, stirring slightly. Katherine gently rolled him onto his back, revealing a handsome face contorted with pain. His eyes fluttered open, deep blue eyes that fixed on her with confusion and something else. Fear, perhaps. "Who are you?" he rasped, attempting to sit up before falling back with a grimace. "Katherine Lawson. I was passing by and saw you lying here." She examined his injuries with practiced eyes. Her father's medical books hadn't gone to waste during those long Boston winters. "You've been shot and your leg appears broken." "Paxson," he muttered. "Paxson Ingram." His eyes darted to the corral, then back to her face with unexpected vulnerability. "Don't leave me like the others." The words caught Katherine off guard. "I'm not leaving," she assured him, surprised by her own certainty. "Can you tell me what happened?" Paxson's eyes closed briefly, his breathing labored. "Rustlers tried to take my horses," he coughed, specks of blood appearing on his lips. "Got 2 of them, but the third," he gestured weakly toward his side. Katherine assessed the situation quickly. The gunshot wound in his side hadn't hit anything vital from what she could tell, but he'd lost considerable blood. The broken leg was a clean break, which was fortunate, but both injuries needed immediate attention. "Mr. Ingram, I need to get you inside," Katherine said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "No one's called me Mr. Ingram since I left Philadelphia." Katherine arched an eyebrow. "You're a long way from Philadelphia." "So are you, Boston," he replied, surprising her. "Your accent, proper as Sunday church." Despite their dire circumstances, Katherine felt her lips twitch upward. "Can you stand with assistance?" Together, they managed to get Paxson to his feet, or rather, his one good foot. Katherine supported him as they hobbled toward the modest cabin, the rain still pounding around them. Inside was sparse but clean, with a stone fireplace, a wooden table with 2 chairs, a small kitchen area, and a single bed in the corner. "You live alone?" Katherine asked, helping him to the bed. Paxson nodded, his jaw clenched against the pane. "Since my partner died last winter. Pneumonia." Katherine busied herself building a fire, grateful to find dry kindling beside the hearth. Once flames were crackling, she turned her attention back to Paxson. "I need to remove your shirt to tend that wound," she said matter-of-factly. His eyes met hers with a flicker of amusement despite his pain. "Most ladies ask me to dinner first." "I'm not most ladies," Katherine replied, already reaching for his buttons. "And you're in no condition for dinner." Working methodically, she cleaned and bandaged the gunshot wound, which thankfully had passed through his side without hitting vital organs. The broken leg proved more challenging. "This will hurt," she warned, positioning herself to set the bone. Paxson's hand shot out, gripping her wrist. "Wait," he said. "Under the bed. Whiskey." Katherine retrieved the bottle, letting him take several long swigs before she set to work. His scream when she pulled the bone into alignment made her flinch, but she continued, fashioning a splint from items around the cabin. By the time she finished, they were both exhausted. The storm still raged outside, and Katherine knew there would be no traveling further tonight. She settled into the room's sole chair, prepared for an uncomfortable night. "Take the bed," Paxson said, his voice slurred with pain and whiskey. "You're injured." "Bed's big enough for two," he muttered, already half asleep. "Promise to be a gentleman. Scout's honor." Katherine hesitated, then made up her mind. She was tired, wet, and cold. Propriety seemed a distant concern out here in the wilderness. She removed her sodden outer garments, leaving her chemise and petticoat, and slipped under the quilt on the far side of the bed, maintaining as much distance as the narrow mattress allowed. "Thank you," Paxson whispered into the darkness, "for not leaving." "Rest," Katherine replied, wondering what he'd meant about the others, and why it mattered so much that she stayed. Morning arrived with gentle fingers of sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. Katherine awoke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until she felt the warmth of another body beside her. During the night, she'd moved closer to Paxson, drawn by his heat in the chilly cabin. Now, her head rested against his uninjured shoulder, and his arm had somehow found its way around her. She carefully extricated herself, feeling a flush creep up her neck. Paxson continued sleeping, his handsome face relaxed in slumber, the hard lines of worry smoothed away. In daylight, she could better appreciate his features' strong jaw covered in stubble, straight nose, and dark lashes that would make any lady envious. Katherine busied herself rekindling the fire and exploring the cabin's modest supplies. She found coffee beans, which she ground and brewed, and some salt pork and cornmeal that would make a passable breakfast. The domestic activity felt strangely comfortable, as if she'd done it 100 times before. "You're still here," Paxson's voice, rough with sleep, startled her. Katherine turned to find him watching her, his blue eyes intent. "I said I wouldn't leave." "People say a lot of things," he replied, attempting to sit up before wincing in pain. "Don't," Katherine admonished, moving quickly to his side. "You'll reopen your wound." She helped him to a more comfortable position, acutely aware of his proximity and the way his calloused hand lingered on her arm. "Why did you think I would leave?" she asked, curiosity finally getting the better of her. Paxson's expression shuddered. "Experience." He glanced around the cabin. "Is that coffee I smell?" Katherine recognized the deflection but didn't press. "And salt pork with johnnycakes if you're hungry." "Starving," he admitted. "But first I should check on the horses." "I'll check on them," Katherine said firmly. "You're not going anywhere on that leg." Surprise flickered across his face. "You know horses?" "My father kept a pair in Boston for our carriage. I used to help the groom care for them when my stepmother wasn't watching." Katherine smiled at the memory. "It was most improper." "I'm beginning to think you enjoy being improper, Miss Lawson." Paxson remarked with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. "Katherine," she corrected. "And perhaps I do." Outside, the morning was crisp and clear, the storm having washed the world clean. The horses in the corral nickered as she approached. Katherine counted 6 animals, 4 sturdy quarter horses, a leggy bay that looked to have thoroughbred blood, and her own tired mare. She fed and watered them all, checking each for injuries and finding none. The ranch was smaller than she'd imagined in the darkness, a modest operation with the corral, a small barn, and what appeared to be a fledgling vegetable garden behind the cabin. It was nothing like the sprawling cattle operations she'd read about, but there was something appealing about its self-contained simplicity. Returning to the cabin, she found Paxson had managed to pull himself into a sitting position against the headboard. "Your horses are fine," she reported, serving him a plate of food, "though I imagine they were quite upset by yesterday's events." Paxson accepted the plate with a nod of thanks. "Those horses are everything I have," he said quietly, when the rustlers came. He trailed off, his knuckles whitening around the fork. "You defended what was yours," Katherine finished for him. "Anyone would have done the same." His eyes met hers, searching. "Not everyone. My previous partner, not my late one, but the one before he ran at the first sign of trouble. Took half our money and left me to face a group of angry Blackfoot alone." "What happened?" Katherine asked, settling into the chair with her own plate. "Turned out they weren't hostile at all, just wanted to trade." A wry smile touched his lips. "Makes for a poor story, I suppose." Katherine laughed, surprising herself with the ease of it. When was the last time she'd laughed so freely? "What brings you to Montana Territory, Katherine?" Paxson asked, seeming genuinely interested. "You're a long way from Boston drawing rooms." Katherine hesitated, then decided honesty was the simplest path. "I purchased land near Hollow Creek. I'm going to start a new life." "Alone?" Paxson's eyebrows rose. "Yes," she replied defensively. "Is that so strange for a woman?" "In 1875, in Montana Territory," he chuckled. "Only completely unheard of." Katherine lifted her chin. "Then I shall be the first." Paxson studied her for a long moment. "What are you running from, Boston?" The question, delivered softly, caught her off guard. "What makes you think I'm running?" "People don't usually travel this far unless they're running to something or away from something." He shrugged. "Usually both." Katherine set her empty plate aside. "My stepmother arranged a marriage to a man older than my father. She claimed it was my father's wish, but—" She shook her head. "I couldn't do it, not even to honor his memory." "So you bought land, sight unseen, thousands of miles away." Paxson whistled low. "That takes courage, or foolishness," Katherine admitted. "I've never farmed a day in my life." "Hollow Creek, you said?" Paxson frowned. "There's good land there, but it's rough country. Winters are harsh." "I'll manage," Katherine said with more confidence than she felt. Paxson looked like he wanted to say more, but was interrupted by a sharp rap at the door. Katherine tensed, remembering the rustlers. "My rifle," Paxson said urgently. "By the door." Katherine retrieved it, holding it awkwardly as she approached the door. "Who's there?" she called. "Sheriff Daniels," came the reply. "Open up, Ingram. Heard there was trouble." Katherine glanced at Paxson, who nodded, visibly relaxing. She opened the door to reveal a weathered man in his 40s, badge pinned to his worn leather vest. The sheriff's eyes widened at the sight of Katherine. "Madam," he said, removing his hat. His gaze traveled from her to Paxson on the bed, and his expression hardened. "What's going on here, Ingram?" "Rustlers, Tom," Paxson explained. "3 of them. I got 2, but the third got me. Miss Lawson here found me and patched me up." Sheriff Daniels' eyes narrowed as he took in the scene, the single bed. Katherine's clearly slept in appearance. "Is that so?" Miss Lawson was traveling to her property near Hollow Creek, Paxson continued, seemingly oblivious to the sheriff's implications. She saved my life. The sheriff turned to Katherine. That true, miss? Yes, Katherine replied, lifting her chin. Mr. Ingram was badly injured. I couldn't leave him. Something in Sheriff Daniels' expression softened. Well then, I'll need statements from both of you, and I should ride out to check on those rustlers. Northwest corner of the property, Paxson directed. By the creek bed, the sheriff nodded. Miss Lawson, would you like an escort to town once I've dealt with this matter? Wouldn't be proper for you to stay here alone with a man, injured or not. Before Katherine could respond, Paxson spoke up. Katherine's welcome to stay as long as she needs. I'm in no condition to cause impropriety. He flashed a disarming smile. Besides, without her, I'll likely starve to death before my leg heals. Sheriff Daniels looked unconvinced. Miss Lawson, Katherine hesitated. The proper response would be to accept the escort to town. Yet the thought of leaving Paxson alone, injured and unable to care for himself or his horses, troubled her. Besides, she was curious about this enigmatic cowboy who'd once called Philadelphia home. I appreciate your concern, Sheriff, she said carefully, but Mr. Ingram requires care I'm able to provide. I would be remiss to abandon him now. The sheriff studied her for a moment, then sighed. Your reputation, miss, is my own concern, Katherine finished firmly. After the sheriff departed to investigate the scene of the shootout, a heavy silence fell over the cabin. Katherine busied herself cleaning up their breakfast dishes, aware of Paxson's eyes following her movements. You didn't have to stay, he said finally. Katherine turned to face him. Do you want me to leave? No, Paxson admitted, his honesty disarming. But you should know what you're getting into. This isn't Boston. People talk. A woman staying alone with a man. I'm aware of the implications, Katherine replied, but I find I care less about what people think out here. Isn't that part of the appeal of the West? Freedom from society's constraints. A slow smile spread across Paxson's face. You're not what I expected, Boston. Is that a compliment, Mr. Ingram? Pax, he corrected. And yes, definitely a compliment. The days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Katherine tended to Paxson's wounds, cooked their meals, and cared for the horses. In the evenings, they talked. Paxson told her about his journey west, how he'd left a promising law career in Philadelphia after discovering his fiancée in a compromising position with his best friend, how he'd wandered through mining camps and cow towns before finding this small parcel of land and deciding to raise horses. In turn, Katherine shared stories of Boston society, her father's medical practice, and her dreams of building something of her own. Neither of them spoke directly about the growing connection between them, though it hummed in the air like electricity before a storm. A week after her arrival, Katherine was brushing down the thoroughbred mare when she heard the sound of hoofbeats approaching. Setting aside the brush, she stepped out of the barn to find a young woman riding toward the cabin. The woman pulled up short at the sight of Katherine, surprise evident on her pretty face. "Hello," Katherine called, walking toward her. "May I help you?" The woman dismounted gracefully, her riding attire far more practical than fashionable. "I'm looking for Pax," she said, her voice friendly but curious. "I'm Olivia Mercer. My father owns the Triple M Ranch east of here." Katherine Lawson, Katherine introduced herself, suddenly conscious of her plain dress and hair tied back with a simple ribbon. "Mr. Ingram is inside. He was injured in a confrontation with rustlers last week." Concern immediately replaced curiosity in Olivia's expression. "Injured? Is he all right?" "He's recovering," Katherine assured her, leading the way to the cabin. "Gunshot wound and a broken leg, but he's healing well." Inside, Paxson had managed to prop himself up in a chair by the table, a deck of cards spread before him in a game of solitaire. His face brightened at the sight of Katherine, then registered surprise when Olivia followed her through the door. "Liv," he greeted, attempting to rise before Katherine shot him a warning look. "What brings you out this way?" "Pa sent me to see if you'd found any sign of our missing cattle," Olivia explained, moving to Paxson's side and placing a familiar hand on his shoulder. "But that hardly matters now." "What happened?" As Paxson explained about the rustlers, Katherine busied herself making coffee, trying to ignore the knot forming in her stomach. The way Olivia leaned toward Paxson, the ease between them, spoke of a long acquaintance and perhaps more. "Miss Lawson found me half dead in the mud," Paxson concluded, his eyes finding Katherine across the room. "She's been playing nursemaid ever since." Olivia turned to regard Katherine with new interest. "That was very brave of you, Miss Lawson. Are you visiting family in the area?" "Katherine purchased land near Hollow Creek," Paxson answered before she could. "She was on her way there when she stumbled across my sorry self." "Hollow Creek?" Olivia's eyebrows rose. "Alone?" Katherine was beginning to tire of that question. "Yes, alone." "Well," Olivia said after a moment, "you're certainly not what I expected when Pa told me Pax had a Boston lady staying with him." She laughed lightly. "The rumors in town are quite something." "Rumors?" Katherine echoed, her heart sinking. Olivia waved a dismissive hand. "Nothing to concern yourself with. Small towns run on gossip. Speaking of which," she turned back to Paxson, "I should get back before more stories start circulating about me." She bent down and placed a quick kiss on Paxson's cheek. "Take care of yourself, you hear? Pa will send some men over to help with your chores until you're back on your feet." After Olivia left, an uncomfortable silence descended. Katherine poured 2 cups of coffee and placed one before Paxson, avoiding his eyes. "She seems nice," Katherine said finally, striving for a casual tone. "Liv, she's the best," Paxson agreed. "Known her since I arrived. Her father gave me my first job in the territory." "You seem close," Katherine ventured, hating herself for prying but unable to stop. Paxson studied her for a moment, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Not in the way you're thinking, Boston. Liv's engaged to a ranger stationed at Fort Benton. Been sweet on him for years." Relief washed over Katherine, followed quickly by embarrassment at her transparency. "I wasn't you were," Paxson interrupted, his smile widening. "But I don't mind." Their eyes held for a long moment, and Katherine felt heat rising to her cheeks. She looked away first, flustered by the intensity of his gaze. "What will you do about the rumors?" she asked, changing the subject. Paxson shrugged. "Nothing to do. People will talk regardless of what we say or do." "It doesn't bother you." "Does it bother you?" he countered. "Your reputation, as the sheriff so delicately put it." Katherine considered the question seriously. In Boston, such rumors would have destroyed her standing completely. No respectable family would receive her, no decent man would court her. But here, thousands of miles from those drawing rooms and their rigid rules, I find I care far less than I should, she admitted. "Good," Paxson said softly. "Because I'm not sorry you stayed, Katherine, not one bit." 2 weeks after her arrival, Katherine stood at the kitchen window, watching a spring storm roll across the prairie. Paxson's condition had improved significantly. The wound in his side had closed cleanly, and his leg was mending well, though he still couldn't put weight on it. More surprisingly, Katherine had settled into life at the small ranch with unexpected ease. She'd learned to cook over an open fire, to mend clothing torn by daily work, to identify which wild greens were edible to supplement their meals. She'd even taken to riding the thoroughbred mare, whom Paxson called Duchess, each morning, exploring the boundaries of his property. "Penny for your thoughts," Paxson said from his place at the table, where he was cleaning his revolver. Katherine turned, smiling. "I was just thinking how different this is from what I imagined when I left Boston. Disappointed." He set the gun aside, giving her his full attention. "No," she answered truthfully. "Though I should be making plans to continue to my own land. You're healing well." Something flickered in Paxson's eyes. Disappointment, perhaps. "You're welcome to stay longer, until I'm fully recovered. And give the town more to gossip about," Katherine teased, though the thought of leaving created a hollow feeling in her chest. "Let them talk," Paxson said with unexpected intensity. "Katherine," a sharp knock at the door interrupted whatever he had been about to say. Katherine opened it to find Sheriff Daniels standing there, his expression grim. "Miss Lawson," he nodded, "Ingram got some news you both should hear." Katherine invited him in, serving coffee as the men exchanged pleasantries. Finally, the sheriff got to the point. "That third rustler you mentioned, Pax, we found him." Sheriff Daniels sipped his coffee. "Or rather, he found us. Rode into town yesterday, shot up the saloon, and took Widow Jenkins' daughter hostage." Paxson straightened, his face hardening. "Mary Jenkins. She's just a girl." 16, the sheriff confirmed. "Claims you killed his brothers and swears he'll have revenge." Katherine's hand flew to her mouth. "The other rustlers were his brothers. The Delaney gang," Sheriff Daniels nodded. "Been terrorizing settlements across 3 territories. We thought they'd moved on to Wyoming, but seems they circled back." "What does he want?" Paxson asked, though his tense expression suggested he already knew. "You," the sheriff said simply. "Says he'll trade the girl for you, wants you to meet him at Widow's Ridge tomorrow at noon." Katherine felt the blood drain from her face. "That's absurd. You can't possibly consider it." "I don't see that I have much choice," Paxson replied, his voice steady. "I can't let anything happen to Mary." "It's a trap," Katherine argued. "He'll kill you both." Sheriff Daniels cleared his throat. "We're organizing a posse, but Delaney's smart. Says if he sees anyone but Ingram approach, he'll kill the girl immediately." "You can't even walk properly," Katherine protested, turning to Paxson. "How do you expect to defend yourself?" Paxson's jaw set stubbornly. "I'll manage." The sheriff rose, placing his hat back on his head. "Think about it, Pax. I'll stop by in the morning to hear your decision, though I reckon I already know what it'll be." He nodded to Katherine. "Miss Lawson." After the sheriff departed, Katherine rounded on Paxson. "You can't seriously be considering this." "I'm not considering it," Paxson replied, reaching for his crutch and pushing himself to a standing position. "I've decided. Mary Jenkins doesn't deserve to die because of my actions." "And you do," Katherine demanded, anger rising from her fear. "This is madness, Paxson." "It's the code out here," he said firmly. "A man stands by the consequences of his actions. Even if those actions were justified, you were defending yourself and your property." Paxson hobbled to where she stood, reaching out to touch her cheek gently. "I appreciate your concern, Boston, but my mind's made up." Katherine jerked away from his touch. "Then you're a fool," she snapped, storming outside into the gathering dusk. She walked to the corral, leaning against the fence as tears of frustration burned in her eyes. The horses moved restlessly, sensing the approaching storm, like the one building inside her. These past weeks with Paxson had awakened feelings Katherine had never experienced before, not the tepid affection she'd felt for the suitable young men her stepmother had paraded before her, but something wild and powerful that frightened and exhilarated her in equal measure. The thought of losing him now was unbearable. The cabin door opened and Paxson made his slow way toward her, careful on his crutch. "You shouldn't be out here," Katherine said, not turning around. Your leg, damn my leg, Paxson interrupted, coming to stand beside her. Katherine, look at me. She turned reluctantly, her eyes meeting his. I won't watch you sacrifice yourself. I don't plan on dying tomorrow, he said, his free hand finding hers. But I can't live with myself if I don't try to save Mary. Then I'm coming with you, Katherine declared. Absolutely not, Paxson's response was immediate. It's too dangerous. I wasn't asking permission, Katherine replied, her chin lifting in that stubborn way he'd come to recognize. You can barely walk. How do you plan to ride to Widow's Ridge alone, Katherine? No, she cut him off. You said it yourself out here, people stand by their actions. Well, I chose to save your life, Paxson Ingram, and I'm not about to let you throw it away now. They stood in silence for a long moment, the air between them charged with emotion. Finally, Paxson sighed. You're the most frustrating woman I've ever met, he said, but there was no real anger in his voice. And the bravest. Katherine felt her resolve softening at his words. I'm terrified, she admitted, but I'm more afraid of losing you. The confession hung between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Paxson's eyes widened slightly, then darkened with an emotion that made her breath catch. Katherine, he said softly, releasing her hand to cup her face. When I said don't leave me like the others that first night, I never imagined you'd become so important to me so quickly. Before she could respond, he leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with weeks of unspoken longing. Katherine melted into him, her arms circling his waist carefully to avoid his healing wound. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the first fat raindrops of the storm had begun to fall around them. We should go inside, Katherine whispered, though she made no move to step away from the circle of his arm. In a minute, Paxson replied, resting his forehead against hers. I need you to know something first. Whatever happens tomorrow, these weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. Katherine felt tears prick her eyes again, but for an entirely different reason. Nothing is going to happen to you tomorrow, she said fiercely. Because we're going to make a plan. They spent the evening planning their approach to the hostage situation. Paxson knew Widow's Ridge well, a rocky outcrop overlooking a narrow valley, with limited approaches. Katherine listened carefully as he described the terrain, suggesting alternatives to his straightforward confrontation. Delaney will expect me to come from the main trail, Paxson explained, sketching a rough map on a sheet of paper. But there's a game path that circles behind the ridge. It's steep but manageable. I could take that route, Katherine suggested. Position myself above while you draw his attention from below. Paxson frowned. That puts you in danger. No more than you, Katherine countered. I may not be a marksman, but I can create a distraction when needed. They argued back and forth, finally reaching a compromise. Katherine would accompany him to a point near the ridge but remain hidden with both horses ready for a quick escape. Only if things went badly would she intervene. As night deepened, exhaustion eventually overcame them both. Without discussion, they settled into bed together, Katherine nestled against Paxson's side, his arm wrapped protectively around her. It felt right, as if they'd been sleeping this way for years rather than just these few weeks. I never expected you, Paxson murmured into her hair. When I came west, I thought I was leaving everything behind: civilization, comfort, love. Katherine tilted her face up to his. And now I'm wondering if I was riding toward something all along, he replied, kissing her softly. Toward you. Morning arrived too quickly. They rose before dawn, preparing in near silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Katherine dressed in her most practical clothing, a split riding skirt she'd altered from one of Paxson's old trousers and a simple blouse. She braided her hair tightly and tucked it under a hat. Paxson watched her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You should be preparing for a Boston Tea Party, not a confrontation with a murderer." "I prefer this," Katherine replied, checking the revolver he'd insisted she take. "At least out here the dangers are honest ones." Sheriff Daniels arrived as promised, dismay evident on his weathered face when Paxson informed him of their plan. "This is no place for a lady," he protested. "Perhaps not," Katherine agreed, "but it's where I've chosen to be." The sheriff looked between them, noting their determined expressions and the protective way Paxson stood beside Katherine despite his injured leg. "There's more between you two than neighborly concern, isn't there?" he asked bluntly. Katherine felt her cheeks warm but held the sheriff's gaze steadily. "Yes," she answered for both of them. Sheriff Daniels sighed. "Well, I can't say I'm surprised. Just be careful, both of you. Delaney's not known for keeping his word." "We know," Paxson assured him. "But Mary Jenkins doesn't deserve to die because of my actions." The sheriff nodded. "The posse will be positioned at the valley entrance out of sight. If you need help, we'll signal," Paxson finished. 3 shots in quick succession. The ride to Widow's Ridge took longer than usual due to Paxson's condition. Katherine stayed close beside him, watching for signs of pain or fatigue. His face remained impassive, but she noticed the tightening around his eyes and the way he occasionally shifted in the saddle to ease the pressure on his leg. They stopped just beyond the final bend in the trail, hidden from view of the ridge above. Katherine helped Paxson dismount, steadying him as he tested his weight on his healing leg. "Remember," he said, gripping her shoulders, "stay hidden unless absolutely necessary." "If things go wrong, nothing will go wrong," Katherine interrupted, her voice firm despite the fear clutching at her heart. "But if it does, I'll be ready." Paxson pulled her to him in a fierce embrace. "You're remarkable, Boston," he whispered against her hair. "When this is over, there's something important I need to ask you." Katherine's heart leapt despite their dire circumstances. "Then you'd better come back to me." With a final kiss, Paxson mounted his horse and rode around the bend, leaving Katherine with the 2 remaining horses in the shelter of a stand of pines. She waited until he was out of sight before leading the horses to a secure spot and finding a position where she could observe without being seen. From her vantage point, Katherine could see Paxson approaching the base of the ridge. Above, a figure stood on an outcropping, one arm restraining a young girl whose terror was visible even at this distance. The man, Delaney, she presumed held a rifle trained on Paxson with his free hand. "That's far enough, Ingram," Delaney called, his voice carrying across the valley. "Toss your weapons and dismount." Katherine watched anxiously as Paxson complied, dropping his revolver and rifle to the ground before carefully sliding from his horse. Even from her position, she could tell the movement cost him significant pain. "Let the girl go, Delaney," Paxson called back. "She has nothing to do with this." Delaney laughed, a harsh sound that sent chills down Katherine's spine. "My brothers had nothing to do with your horses either, but that didn't stop you from putting bullets in them." "Your brothers were trying to steal my livelihood," Paxson replied evenly. "I gave them a chance to leave peacefully. They chose otherwise. And now you'll pay," Delaney snarled. "An eye for an eye, Ingram. The Bible says so." Katherine tensed as Delaney shoved Mary to her knees, raising his rifle to take aim at Paxson. Without conscious thought, she drew the revolver Paxson had given her and fired into the air. The shot echoed through the valley, startling Delaney enough that his shot went wide, kicking up dust at Paxson's feet. What the Delaney whirled, searching for the source of the interruption. Katherine didn't hesitate. She fired again, this time aiming for the rock near Delaney's feet. The bullet splintered stone, sending fragments flying. Delaney cursed, momentarily releasing his hold on Mary. The girl seized her opportunity, pulling away from her captor and scrambling down the rocky slope. Below, Paxson had dropped to retrieve his weapons. Despite his injured leg, he moved with surprising speed, taking cover behind a boulder as Delaney's attention split between his escaping hostage and the unseen shooter. "Show yourself, coward," Delaney shouted, firing blindly in Catherine's direction. Katherine ducked as bullets thudded into the trees around her. Heart pounding, she remembered Paxson's signal to the posse 3 shots in quick succession. Raising her revolver, she fired 3 times into the air, the shots ringing out like a summons. Paxson, seeing her signal, emerged from behind his cover and fired at Delaney, the shot grazing the outlaw's arm. Delaney howled in pain but kept his footing, returning fire with wild abandon. Katherine watched in horror as one of Delaney's bullets found its mark. Paxson staggered, clutching his shoulder, but remained upright. Driven by fear for him, Katherine abandoned her hiding place, running toward Paxson even as she knew she was exposing herself to danger. "Katherine, no," Paxson shouted, seeing her emerge from the trees. Delaney, spotting her, swung his rifle in her direction with a triumphant grin. "Well, well, Ingram. Brought a lady friend to watch you die. How thoughtful." Time seemed to slow as Delaney took aim at Katherine. She froze, suddenly aware of her foolishness in revealing herself. Paxson's face contorted with a mixture of rage and terror. The shot that rang out next came not from Delaney's rifle, but from behind Katherine. The outlaw jerked, a look of surprise crossing his face before he toppled forward off the ridge, landing with a sickening thud on the rocks below. Katherine turned to see Sheriff Daniels lowering his rifle, the posse fanned out behind him. "Cutting it mighty close there, miss," the sheriff remarked dryly. Relief flooded through Katherine, quickly replaced by concern for Paxson. She ran to where he stood swaying, blood seeping through his fingers where he clutched his shoulder. "You fool," she whispered, tears blurring her vision as she reached him. "What were you thinking, exposing yourself like that?" Paxson gave her a weak smile. "I was thinking I couldn't bear to watch him hurt you." He winced as she examined his wound. "Besides, seems like I'm making a habit of getting shot and having you patch me up." "Not funny," Katherine scolded, though her lips twitched despite her worry. "Let's get you back to the ranch." "Miss Jenkins?" Paxson asked, looking around. "She's safe," Sheriff Daniels called, approaching with the girl in question beside him. "Shaken up but not harmed." Mary Jenkins, a slender girl with tear-streaked cheeks, approached Paxson hesitantly. "You came for me," she said, her voice small with wonder. "Even though you were hurt." "Anyone would have done the same," Paxson replied gently. "No," Mary shook her head emphatically. "They wouldn't. Thank you, Mr. Ingram." She turned to Katherine. "And thank you, madam, for the distraction. I wouldn't have gotten away otherwise." As the sheriff's men dealt with Delaney's body and escorted Mary back to town, Katherine helped Paxson mount his horse, her hands gentle but firm. "Let's go home," she said softly. The word hung between them, home. In just a few short weeks, Paxson's small ranch had come to feel more like home than any place Katherine had ever lived. Paxson caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Home," he agreed. "With you." The following weeks brought rapid changes. Paxson's new shoulder wound healed more quickly than his previous injuries, and by early summer, he was moving with only a slight limp as a reminder of his ordeal. Katherine had postponed her journey to her own land indefinitely, settling into life at the ranch with increasing certainty that this was where she belonged. Word had spread of their role in Mary Jenkins' rescue, transforming the town's gossip from scandal to heroism overnight. The same tongues that had clucked disapprovingly now, spoke of Catherine's bravery and Paxson's honor. Not that either of them particularly cared for public opinion. On a warm evening in June, they sat together on the small porch Paxson had added to the cabin, watching the sunset paint the prairie in golds and purples. Catherine's head rested on Paxson's shoulder, his arm wrapped comfortably around her waist. "I received a letter from my stepmother today," Katherine said, breaking their companionable silence. Paxson tensed slightly beside her. "What did she want?" "To inform me that Mr. Holloway has married someone else," Katherine replied with a small laugh. "Apparently my disappearance caused quite the scandal. Do you regret it?" Paxson asked, studying her face in the fading light. Leaving Boston behind, Katherine considered the question seriously. "I miss certain things, books, concerts, my father's old friends, but no, I don't regret it." She turned to face him fully. "How could I, when leaving led me to you?" Paxson's eyes softened. "Remember when I said I had something important to ask you?" After the confrontation with Delaney, Catherine's heart quickened. "I remember." He shifted, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a simple gold band. "It's not fancy," he said, suddenly nervous. "Nothing like what a Boston lady would expect, but it's perfect," Katherine interrupted, her eyes filling with tears. "I haven't asked yet," Paxson pointed out, a smile tugging at his lips. "Then ask," she whispered. "Katherine Lawson, when I said don't leave me like the others, I never imagined you'd stay not just to heal my wounds but to heal parts of me I didn't know were broken." He held the ring between them, his blue eyes earnest. "I love you more than I thought possible. Will you marry me and make this small ranch into the home I've always dreamed of?" "Yes," Katherine answered without hesitation, her heart so full it might burst. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that promised a lifetime of tomorrows, Katherine knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home not in the land she'd purchased sight unseen, but in the heart of a wounded cowboy who had asked her not to leave. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the town's small church. Olivia Mercer served as Catherine's maid of honor, while Sheriff Daniels stood up for Paxson. The entire settlement turned out for the occasion, curious to witness the union of the Philadelphia lawyer-turned-cowboy and the Boston lady who had defied convention to save him twice. Katherine wore a dress of pale blue silk, ordered specially from Denver, while Paxson looked uncommonly handsome in a new suit, his usually unruly dark hair tamed for the occasion. As they exchanged vows, Katherine thought of the strange and winding path that had led her to this moment from Boston drawing rooms to a tiny church in Montana territory, standing beside a man she hadn't known existed just months ago. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher declared, beaming at the couple. "You may kiss your bride, Mr. Ingram." Paxson didn't hesitate, gathering Katherine into his arms and kissing her with a tenderness that made the ladies in attendance sigh appreciatively. When they turned to face their well-wishers, Katherine caught sight of Mary Jenkins, smiling shyly from beside her mother. "I believe we owe that young lady a debt of gratitude," Katherine whispered to her new husband as they walked down the aisle. Paxson squeezed her hand. "How so?" "If not for the circumstances of her rescue, we might have taken much longer to admit our feelings," Katherine explained. "Sometimes it takes facing loss to realize what you truly value." The celebration continued at the Mercer's ranch, where tables groaned under the weight of food prepared by every household in the community. As tradition dictated, Paxson and Katherine opened the dancing, swaying together to a fiddle's sweet melody. "Happy Mrs. Ingram." Paxson murmured against her ear. The name sent a thrill through Katherine. "Incredibly so, Mr. Ingram." As the evening progressed, Katherine found herself drawn into conversation with several local women who had previously kept their distance. Now they welcomed her with genuine warmth, offering friendship and advice for frontier living. "You must join our quilting circle," Mrs. Peterson insisted, patting Katherine's hand. "Every Wednesday at the schoolhouse." "I'd like that," Katherine replied, surprised to find she meant it. The Boston Katherine would have found such an activity tedious, but here, she recognized it for what it was: community, connection, belonging. Later, as they rode back to their ranch beneath a canopy of stars, Katherine reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken. She had come west seeking independence, determined to prove she could manage on her own. Instead, she had found partnership, a different kind of freedom born not of solitude but of being truly known and accepted. "What are you thinking?" Paxson asked, his horse moving in step with hers. "I was thinking about my father," Katherine answered truthfully. "He used to say that life rarely gives us what we think we want, but often gives us what we need." "And what do you need, Katherine Ingram?" Paxson's voice was tender in the darkness. She reached across the space between their horses to take his hand. "This, our life together," she laughed softly, "though I wouldn't object to indoor plumbing someday." "I'll build you the finest house in the territory," Paxson promised, "with all the modern conveniences Boston could offer." "I don't need a fine house," Katherine assured him. "Just you, safe and whole." They reached the ranch, their home, and dismounted. The cabin glowed with welcome, lantern lights spilling from the windows. Paxson swept Katherine into his arms, carrying her across the threshold despite her laughing protests about his still healing leg. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ingram," he said, setting her gently on her feet inside. "Home," Katherine echoed, winding her arms around his neck. "I never truly had one until I found you." 10 years later, Katherine stood at the corral fence, watching as Paxson led their daughter's new pony in careful circles. 6-year-old Elizabeth sat proudly in the saddle, her dark hair so like her father's escaping from its braids, while her younger brother James bounced impatiently on the fence rail beside Katherine. "When's my turn, Mama?" the 4-year-old demanded. "After your sister," Katherine reminded him, smoothing his unruly auburn hair a perfect match for her own. "Patience is a virtue, young man." "That's what Pa always says," James replied with a dramatic sigh, "but ponies are more fun than virtues." Katherine laughed, her heart full as she watched her family. The small ranch had grown prosperous over the years. Paxson's eye for horseflesh had proven exceptional, and his breeding program had produced animals sought after throughout the territory. They had built a larger home 2 years ago with indoor plumbing, as promised, though they'd kept the original cabin as a guest house. Katherine had found her own purpose beyond being wife and mother, though she treasured those roles above all others. Using her father's medical books and her own innate compassion, she had become the settlement's unofficial healer, tending to ailments and injuries when the nearest doctor was days away. She'd even delivered several babies, including Olivia Mercer's twins last spring. Life wasn't always easy. Montana winters remained brutal, and the work never ended. There had been droughts that threatened their livelihood, illnesses that frightened them, and the occasional dispute with neighbors or passing troublemakers. But through it all, Katherine and Paxson had faced each challenge together, their bond only strengthening with time. "Mama, look," Elizabeth called, waving excitedly as she completed her circuit of the corral. "I'm riding all by myself." Paxson, who had been holding a lead rope the entire time, winked at Katherine over their daughter's head. "She's a natural, just like her mother." "I want to go now," James insisted, already scrambling over the fence before Katherine could stop him. "Patience, son," Paxson called, helping Elizabeth dismount before turning to James. Good horsemen wait their turn. As the children traded places, Paxson came to stand beside Katherine, slipping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. "Happy?" he asked, echoing the question he'd first posed on their wedding day. Katherine leaned into him, watching as their son settled onto the pony with determination. "More than I ever imagined possible," she answered truthfully. "Even without Boston's comforts." Paxson teased, his eyes crinkling at the corner's lines earned from years of laughter and squinting into the Montana sun. "I haven't missed Boston in years," Katherine replied, "though I am grateful for the bathtub you installed." Paxson laughed, the sound still as warm and captivating as it had been the first time she'd heard it. "Best investment I ever made, according to you." "Second best," Katherine corrected, turning in his arms to face him. "The first was when you asked me not to leave you like the others." His expression softened as he gazed down at her. "I thank God every day that you stayed, Katherine Ingram. As if I could have left," she whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "My heart would have stayed behind anyway." In the corral, James let out a whoop of delight as the pony broke into a trot, while Elizabeth called out instructions to her brother with all the authority of an older sister. The late afternoon sun bathed the scene in golden light, turning ordinary moments into memories to be treasured. This was her life now, so different from what she had planned, yet infinitely more precious. When Katherine had fled Boston, she'd been running away from a future she couldn't bear. Instead, she had run straight into the arms of a wounded cowboy who had needed her as much as she needed him. And she had never left.